All right, let's kick things off. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to today's roundtable event hosted by the Southwest Regional Manufacturing Association. I'm Jeff Poirer, and I'm going to moderate today's event, and as the board president of the SRMA, I'd like to welcome you all. So if you're unfamiliar with the SRMA, or the Southwest Regional Manufacturing Association, or this is your first event, we're a nonprofit in Southwest Florida, and the idea or what we do is promote idea exchange among businesses within the manufacturing sector. We provide resources and contacts for businesses looking to hire or looking to thrive, and we're an advocate for the manufacturing industry on a state and a federal level. So we like to identify gaps in the knowledge pool here in Southwest Florida, and then we try to present and do panelists or roundtables to bring some of that to the forefront. So today's event is going to focus on international trade. We have 4 expert panelists here who will be commenting and discussing on topics such as the vetting of international firms, maintaining quality standards, importing, exporting, and then obtaining international certifications. I'm going to be asking the panelists a series of pre-recorded and some improvised questions related to international trade, and hopefully the panelists will keep that conversation going, and I'll try to fill in the gaps. So international trade has become the subject of many conversations lately, primarily due to the pandemic and some failure for some international supply chains, as you might be aware. So as the world starts to open up, hopefully, it's tough to forecast the long-term lasting changes that are here to stay. One thing has become clear though, solidifying your local supply chains can aid in weathering an international crisis, even a local one. So for some goods and products, current demand is also still exceeding supply, like microchips. So this, highlights the importance of local manufacturing and trying to reestablish supply chains here within the United States. So it also, is reinforced by taking a look at our local economy here in Southwest Florida. During the pandemic, we were hit pretty hard because we're primarily, around tourism and service business. So we were highly susceptible to major losses. If you want to diversify the region and hedge against these types of events, obviously we need to build a diverse economy down here, manufacturing being a pretty solid one. So with that, I want to make a special announcement. If you subscribe to any of our mailer lists or are in touch with the SRMA on a normal basis, you may already know this, but we've hired an executive director to help the board out. So as you may be aware, all the board members of the SRMA, we are non-paid volunteers. So this typically is not our primary career, and it makes it tough to really establish ourselves within the region and really continue to keep moving forward. So I'd like to thank and congratulate Rob Harris for becoming the executive director of the organization. You'll be seeing Rob more often now. He'll probably be attending these events in the future. And our goal still is the same: drive manufacturing growth within this region and provide as many resources to businesses here as we can. So thank you, board members, for your time, and Rob as well too. We look forward to working with you. So at this time, I'm going to introduce the panelists and let them give them their little background on what they do and kind of why they're an expert in their field. I'm going to start with Gary McKinley, who's with Craters and Freighters, and I want to thank Gary for sponsoring today's event as well too. So Gary, if you can give us kind of a background on what Craters and Freighters is and what you do, we'll start kicking it off.
Thank you, Jeff. Craters and Freighters is a national group. We manufacture shipping containers for industrial and domestic use for international shipping. They are certified wood being used. Our location's been here for over 25 years. We're part of a national group, as I said. We just celebrated our 30th anniversary corporately. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate that. And I don't know if you can move your mic, maybe your phone a little closer to your mouth. It was a little hard on my end to hear you there, Gary. Thank you. Next, I'm going to do Elena Mendez with EXIM Bank. Elena, if you could unmute yourself and give us a brief description on yourself and EXIM Bank's role. Oop, you're still muted, Elena. I believe you have to click there you go.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you all. I have been with EXIM Bank for 9 years. Prior to that, I was an international banker, so I have a little bit more of a consulting focus on how exporters can best use their resources So I do cover the state of Florida as well as Mississippi, Alabama, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. So I'm happy to participate in this and other future events. Thank you.
Thanks, Elena. And for those unaware, we may get into it in a little bit. EXIM Bank stands for Export Import Bank, and we'll get into the details behind that.
Yes.
Next up, we have Kevin Brady. Kevin's with the FGCU Florida Small Business Development Center. Kevin, if you want to give your background. Kevin's also a board member, so I'm familiar with Kevin.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here and great to get in front of everybody and speak about international trade. I spent roughly 25 years in international sales and marketing. And I currently, as Jeff said, I'm an international trade specialist at the university, as well as an adjunct professor teaching global business, and happy to be here.
Thank you, Kevin. All right, and then Dan. Dan is the last one. Dan Bjerk. I might have butchered that, Dan. You can fix it if I did it wrong. Dan's with the Department of Commerce. So, Dan, if you want to give your intro real quick.
You did well. My name, it stumbles most people. Thank you. Yeah, my name is Dan Bjerk. I'm with the U.S. Department of Commerce, and within Commerce, we are in a group called the U.S. Commercial Service. And our mission is just to help U.S. companies expand their sales outside of the United States. And in a nutshell, it's whatever question you have about exporting and sometimes importing, but mostly exporting is what my focus is. We can try to get some answers for you. And we do have a network of professionals around the world. Wherever there's a U.S. embassy or consulate, we have staff on the ground in those countries that can help get answers to questions that might be troubling you as you expand internationally.
Thank you, Dan. All right, so thank you all again to our panelists. Now, these SRMA roundtable events, they're designed to spur discussion, debate, and bring up topics that many owners and business management professionals, they may not have time to address during the week. So while you might not be taking detailed notes, if there's something that piques your interest or you have a question for later on, write it down, or you can send it through the chat. Zoom has a chat feature at the bottom. I'm going to be checking that periodically, and I'll actually ask the panelists those questions if you have them. If you don't get to ask it during the event and you want to write it down and email it to us, info@srma.net, and we'll try to connect you with the panelist, or we can try to answer the question to our best of our ability. So we want to also get feedback on our events, right? So if you have something during the event you liked, you didn't like, or if you'd like to see a topic in the future that's a little bit different than what we've done in the past, go ahead and shoot us an email and let us know what you'd like to see. We're here for you, and the idea is to provide relevant content for everyone in the region. So we love your feedback. So again, SRMA is a nonprofit organization that operates on membership dues and sponsorship. So if you know someone that's a regional manufacturer that would be willing to join or should benefit from being part of this organization, please reach out. Let them know what you've seen today and what we can do for them. The larger we become, the more offerings we can have, and the more we can provide the community. So we're always looking for memberships and sponsorship, and anyone really to, that wants to build manufacturing in Southwest Florida. So, all right, at this point, we're going to start the roundtable discussion. The event's recorded and available on our website at a further date under the events tab. So during the event, you'll have access to the chat feature. Like I mentioned, you can write down any questions, any comments, keep me in check if you see anything going awry. I'm going to check it every few minutes, but again, info@srma.net if you do have questions you want later answered. So we strive to make these events beneficial for any size business, for any level of management professional. So for the panelists, if you have any acronyms or initialisms that you typically use on a daily basis, I'd ask that you speak them out so that everyone just assume that they have a basic understanding at this point, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to keep continuity between some topics, but with a panelist or a panelist group like this, there's not always as much overlap as you'd think. So I may jump around a little bit to make sure that I get everyone some questions and a lot of back and forth. But at any point, if you want to chime in and answer a question that was proposed to someone else, by all means, I'll try to get around to everyone on that. So I may also answer my own questions. I know we have Gary here as a business professional, but sometimes other manufacturers want to hear from someone that's already kind of experienced some of this. I know you're all supplemental to the manufacturing industry, but sometimes it's good to get a first-person perspective. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and kick things off, and I'm going to start with Kevin, since Kevin's a specialist in SEO, marketing, sales, you name it, internationally. Kevin, what's the biggest, just the most general question I have, what's the biggest barrier to entry for someone getting into international sales?
Well, I think there's a number of things companies need to consider, and most companies, I believe, really struggle with just following the procedures that are going to be required in the different marketplaces. Companies here in the US get comfortable doing business a specific way, structuring their invoices a specific way, handling their logistics, their finance. So there's a lot of fear, and I think that's what really pushes people away, is just the unknown. And they need to have someone who understands these processes, or they need to train someone to be able to overcome these barriers. So it's a combination of just the education side, and then having a person that can willingly go out and learn these things and structure them correctly.
So it's a little bit of fear of where to go next. And do you see a lot of businesses that try to saturate the US market completely before they take a spin towards international sales?
Yeah, and that's something that we see a lot. However, kind of in this new era, a lot of companies are born international, as they like to say, or they like to term. They come out and they're looking to do international trade from the beginning. So you get a little bit of both, but typically when we look for exporters to qualify them to go overseas, we like to see a good track record in the United States, which typically means that they've done their due diligence here in the US, they've proven themselves, and now they're ready to take that step overseas.
So are American products still represented as high quality and desirable internationally?
They certainly are, and especially when you look at the industrial products, I believe still have a great reputation. The US still has a lot of innovative companies that are producing, not only industrial, but also tech. So yeah, we still have a good reputation in the foreign markets, and I think that's always going to continue.
Okay. And then I'm going to switch to Dan here. So Dan, you mentioned embassies and getting in contact with the local embassy. Let's say you've got a sales plan and you have a target country. How do you go about making that contact, and what does that process look like?
Typically, the way it starts is we would send out to the company representative a questionnaire and have you fill that out. It gives us a little background. Sorry for the paperwork, we're government, but anyway, there is a questionnaire that we just want your name, your address, what your product or service offering is, what markets you are looking at, what kind of competition you have, who are your major competitors, have you got previous experience in the market? Those are the kinds of questions that we pose in this questionnaire. And once we have that, then my next step is I will go to the embassy of the country that the company is interested in targeting. And I will then bring on, I'll send an email with the questionnaire to a specialist in the embassy that handles the industry sector that the company is in. So we've got somebody that understands the industry, that sector in the embassy and in that country. Their job is to go to the local trade shows outside of pandemic times, of course, but go to the trade shows, network with the associations and so on and so forth. So they have a pretty good feel of what's going on in that sector of the economy. And then the next step is we will do a conference call to, these days we're using Microsoft Teams as our platform to do a video call that would be the company representative, our specialist in the embassy, and sometimes a couple of specialists in the embassy. We may have companies, for example, that are selling into more than one market segment. They've got a technical product, but it's going not only for the, it's not only an IT product, let's say, but it's also in the medical field, okay? So we may have our medical industry, healthcare industry specialist, as well as the IT specialist join that call. okay, and then talk through the issues that they would be faced with when going into that market.
That's a great response. Now, so you mentioned you go to the embassy, you contact them. Now, one question I'm sure, since we have a lot of smaller manufacturers in Southwest Florida, is this they're too small of a product to try to push into a different country, or do you guys help out with
No.
really any kind of export?
No, and you know, I would say that probably, I don't know, I guess I'd say maybe 98% of my time is spent with companies with less than 50 employees. So I'm doing almost exclusively small companies, and I've got companies frequently that are like 3 people that I'm working with. Okay, so it's really not the size of the company. It's like Kevin was alluding to earlier. Do you have a track record? You know, because foreign customers are going to be asking, who do you sell to in the United States? Okay, so do you have a track record? And are you committed? Is senior management committed to the process of exporting? Because that it does take a commitment. We just, you know, if we just get a salesperson, we want to know that the executive staff in the organization is behind the effort to export, because it takes time and it takes resources to accomplish it.
Of course. Thank you. Elena, I'm going to switch to you real quick.
Sure.
Can you give us, I did look through your website. I want to thank your group for posting this event on your website as well too. I saw the major things is basically the export credit insurance that you provide, as
Right.
well as the basically almost financing for the buyer side. Can you give us an explanation on the major services provided by EXIM Bank and how those benefit anyone that's trying to break into an international market?
Sure, happy to. EXIM Bank is basically set up in 3 groupings. One is going to be the U.S. exporter. The other one is going to be the foreign buyer. And the other one is the lender programs. So in the U.S. exporter side, we offer 2 specific programs, and that's the export credit insurance program, as well as the working capital program through our network of lenders. The export credit insurance program is probably the first point of start for most exporters. And that's because you are going to be looking to go into new and existing markets with mitigation of risk of non-payment from your overseas buyers. And that for the small businesses, and I want to repeat what Dan just said, we have no minimums as far as how big or small the exporter is. We've done very small businesses. The only thing that we have limitations on are startups, because we need the financial performance to start the process. But as far as established businesses, and especially manufacturing, which is a natural point of start with moving from domestic into international, we look at the smallest or the largest transactions. We have no limitations as far as we're concerned with export credit. So I would also like to mention that the 3 federal agencies, with Dan being one of them, the U.S. Commercial Service, EXIM Bank, and SBA with SBDC, of course, are very well connected as far as trying to service any exporter in need. We will cross-reference each other's programs in the event that ours does not meet their needs at that point. So it's very good to have those resources connect at any one point. We also have a lot of state level agencies or organizations that click into our programs as well for export promotion. So at any point in time, if you connect with one of us, we'll definitely get you to the point where you need to be. And so I just wanted to mention that before I forget. The other program, which is the Working Capital Guarantee Program, is a pre-export financing program, and it's for the exporter to get the materials and supplies needed to get inventory in and used for manufacturing to the end of export. So in the case of manufacturing, it's perfect because what it does is it increases the advance rates on asset-based lending programs in banks, and where there's certainly ineligible categories, we kind of alleviate the restraints that the typical traditional asset-based lending program has in the banks, and increase the advance rates by usually 50 or even more %. So you kind of double or triple the lending base that you have for export promotions.
Perfect. Thank you, Elena. And I just want to reiterate one point about EXIM Bank that when I started looking into this back a few years ago was pretty important. So, you know, you find international customers and they want to work the terms. If you haven't done any international business, you're going to try to get worked for price. They don't want to put any money down, and they expect, you know, credit terms for a deal. EXIM Bank is actually insuring your receivables on those deals if you're working through EXIM Bank. So now you don't have to be, you know, weary of someone from a different country not paying, because I'm sure, you know, going to trying to receive that money if it's gone already is tough. So we'll circle back to that in a little bit. Gary, I want to come to you now and let you talk for a minute. Shipping and receiving. So no, that's a scary thing, I think, for some exporters when you're first getting into the game. You know, you don't really know, you know, what you need to do or how to even start the process. If they contact you, what do you give for recommendations, or how do you open up with a client that's looking to ship internationally?
We start off with the country and the size of the items that they wish to deal with on the export. We do ocean and we also do air freight. But I caution a customer when they start off on a new product. One of the first things we like to work with them on is the package design. We have certified packaging engineers on staff in our home office. They'll work with a customer on having a compact, safe, careful way to do the shipping. This can save money in the long run. It takes a week or two to get through the process and get containers designed for their specific use. Many of the countries do require special wood for exporting. They must be stamped. Caution anyone getting into doing exporting, stay clear of attempting to evade or circumvent any of the requests the country has. We can counsel you, help you with it. It gets down to some countries that even require certain color names on their documents. But if you're going to be dealing with the same customer over and over on repeat shipments, it becomes a very smooth process. The company does the pickup, do the packaging. We track the shipments so the customer knows when the shipments are going to be arriving.
Okay, Gary, we are having a little bit of a tough time hearing you still, so I can summarize kind of what Gary said basically.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a little better. I don't know if it's a phone thing or what, but Gary, you mentioned specific types of wood you need to ship to certain countries, right? And I would assume that's for making sure organisms don't ship different continents. You mentioned you guys have on staff basically engineers and packaging people that can build around your item so that you're not having any shifting during international shipment. And what else did you mention there? I missed the rest of them.
Air or ocean. If the shipment is large enough, ocean is the less expensive. We'll do to the port or to the customer's door.
Okay.
Hey, Jeff, just to piggyback on that, what Gary was talking about as well as the documentation requirements for the different markets are so critical in understanding what they will require at customs when those products arrive in that country. So that's something that's very critical that his organization does as well.
Okay, and I think you're referring to the Schedule B classification for products. Is that what that is? Is that the same thing?
Yeah, not just that, but also the the actual documentation that's required.
I see, to make it
each
through.
specific market. The invoices, the certificates of origin, the packing list, all these things have different requirements for each different market.
Gotcha. So that brings me to another question, Kevin, while we're on the subject. Basically, what international standards can be used to verify these products, meet any type of, compliance? What are we looking at? So I buy something from international, or I want to ship. What is my best bet, and who do I go to for an organization for a certificate of compliance, or for, any kind of standard? What's your first thoughts?
Well, there's different agencies you can look towards when you're trying to make sure that you're in compliance, both domestic and foreign. So Dan's agency obviously does a great job. They have they produce a product called the Country Commercial Guide, which it not only tells you about doing business in certain markets, but will also touch on some of these requirements that you need to have to export to a certain market. One big thing we come across as well is with consumer goods is labeling. So you're going to a different country, say France, for example, you're going to have that product labeled in French. So the language requirements are there as well. As far as certifications, the European Union, obviously, you have your CE mark and you have some other certifications. So you need to go country by country to look at those. But the resources are available. Like I said, both here in the US and overseas, exporters can readily find that information.
So really what I'm hearing is your best bet is to find first your market, then to start studying the market you want to break into, utilize resources from whether it's either EXIM Bank or Department of Commerce. Really, you need to develop a plan. It's not as simple as just, pushing your product like in the US.
Sure. And the thing to keep in mind for most people is it's not one size fits all like the United States. So every single market's going to have a different requirement. And that's what companies need to be cognizant of as they look at exporting.
Now, digital platforms nowadays, I think, a lot of businesses flow through an eBay or an Amazon, and they, market through that. Are those really truly international companies? Can you sell internationally through a platform like Amazon or eBay if you want to put your product on them?
You can. There are ways and means to do that. One thing that I always tell our domestic companies is that they need to really enhance their digital presence, even with their own website. Look at opportunities within that market to maybe globalize or localize their website for that foreign market. And then also look at perhaps even getting a foreign domain name to sell their products or promote their products if it's a B2B scenario in these different markets. So to answer your question, though, going back to Amazon and these other companies, yes, you're actually shipping it overseas, but you're using obviously Amazon as a vehicle to do that.
Okay.
A lot of companies are a little afraid of doing their own e-commerce, but these big companies like Amazon, you're paying them quite a hefty sum to represent your product. So that's something to keep in mind before they jump in with those companies.
Okay, that makes sense. So in regards to getting yourself, set up internationally before that, what does the FSBDC provide for services to assist in that process?
Yeah, as far as international, I like to sit down with people and just talk about what their goals are for international and just start explaining how the process would work, the commitment that would be involved. Dan touched on something very important, which we always look at is how committed is the management team to actually doing international trade, because there's a commitment level there. As we talked about, processes are different. The way you're doing business will be a little bit different. So there's going to be an investment there in human capital. There's going to be resources needed to move on this. So I sit down with people and just try to understand where they want to go with this and try to develop a plan for them to take this one step at a time and really understand what they're getting into before they jump.
Is the target market they think is the best opportunity always the first market they should move into? Or do you see conflict sometimes in terms of ease of, ingress?
Yeah, not necessarily. Obviously, I tell companies you want to export wherever you can work into, right? But there are opportunities, I think, with some of the agreements we have. Obviously, our free trade agreements, for example, right now in Latin America with the CAFTA DR agreement, which includes Central America, the Dominican, and then into Latin America with Chile, Colombia, and Peru. There's great opportunities for Florida companies here just because of that proximity, and those countries are very comfortable trading with Florida-based companies. So we look at those opportunities first, kind of that low-hanging fruit, maybe where's the need. It depends what you're selling as well. So.
Okay. And then Dan, can you expand on that? The FTA is the free trade agreement. What does that mean to someone that's looking to export internationally?
Well, the free trade agreements provide a platform, if you will, that has some pre-negotiated conditions and so forth. So there are going to be, it's not only the duties. Everybody, when they first think of the free trade agreement, it's 0 duties for your product to get into the country. Okay, that's great. And it's wonderful. Now, but there are other things that are included in a free trade agreement. In addition to the duties, it has to do with intellectual property protection. And they will have other things, dispute mechanisms and so forth. So, for example, if a company were to come to us and they're doing business in a country with which we have a free trade agreement, say it's Colombia or Mexico or Singapore or whatever, if there's a dispute that's going on, we've got a mechanism in place in Washington, D.C. With our specialists there that are on our country desks and also our industry desk officers that are dealing more with the policy and the bilateral relationship. So if you were to come to me and say, you've got an issue with something in one of these countries, I can go to my colleagues in Washington. They then can raise these issues, and they're looking for these kinds of issues to raise when they have their bilateral talks with each of our free trade agreement countries and other countries as well. Okay, so even China, for example, we don't have a free trade agreement with China, but we can raise these issues with our counterparts in the other country so that they're aware that something is happening at customs or there's some other issue going on that we feel is not fair. So it's a mix, but the free trade agreements provide a platform, an environment, if you will, that makes it kind of a level playing field for all concerned.
Okay, thanks, Dan. And we commented before that some people have hesitation moving into international markets because they don't have a full understanding. But maybe you can comment more on intellectual property and if you build something here, we're supposed to be an intellectual capital and we want to export, but how do you protect that? I've looked at some of these deals and how to take patents from the US and try to get them internationally. It costs a lot of money for a small business. How do we circumnavigate that?
Yeah, that is true. And it's not just getting the patent. It's once you have an infringement of your patent in another country, it then is how do you enforce it and the cost it takes to enforce it. The enforcement side is more expensive than getting the patents. Okay, so yeah, it's a serious business decision that a company has to make. But we do have we can tap into expertise at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. I'm doing that currently for a company looking at Taiwan, and I've done it in China. And and U.S. Patent and Trademark Office does have a few people scattered around the globe. I don't know how many, but they have a few in our embassies in various countries. China, of course, is one. They've got one in the Middle East and Latin America. So they are scattered around the globe, but we can bring those kinds of resources in for free consultation for a company to sit down and talk to these people, and that's what they do is international patents, trademarks, and copyrights. Okay, different. I usually have to get a different person for each one because they specialize in those three areas. But we can bring those people into a conversation to talk about your strategy going forward and what it really is going to take, so that they can prepare you for that. But yes, the IP is a serious issue. It becomes a business discussion inside the company, whether to file for those patents and then enforce them. I've had conversations with companies in the past, especially in the technology field, where they have decided purposely not to file for patents and pursue infringements because they go through revs of their products every 3-4 years. They're changing the product and got new patents coming out, and say no, it's just it's going to happen. They recognize it's going to happen, but they say we're changing things so frequently that we're always going to be one step ahead of the competition in their mind. Okay, so they don't bother with it. So you get the different schools of thought, okay, from a company point of view as to whether or not to file and protect or not. And that's a business decision and a risk that you have to. It's a business risk that you have to evaluate and see what you want to do.
Yeah, I've actually been in that situation. So we were, paying for patents internationally all around the globe, and then we had an infringement in a certain country that we had a free trade agreement with, I believe. And at that point, we talked to counsel, we talked to a couple different specialists, and we decided to write a strongly worded letter from a lawyer because it was the cheaper option. But it made us reconsider, should we really hold patents on all this stuff internationally if we're paying for renewals every 5 to 10 years and then not going to fight it? So I feel your pain there, that's for sure. I'm going to switch over to Elena at this point. So Elena, I noticed on the website, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, you have to have a purchase order or you have to have some type of an agreement in place to approach EXIM Bank for maybe the credit insurance.
Okay, so the credit insurance is probably in a two-pronged approach. One is for products, the other one is for services. And when I say services, it can be consulting, it can be legal, it can be accounting, engineering, all sorts of service providers can be considered as exporters of their services overseas. On the services side, we would need a contract between the provider and their client, spelling out the terms of their payment. So if they're going to be invoicing for their services either monthly or quarterly, all the details of that. And then of course, every time the services are rendered, they have to submit an invoice of those services. On the product side, it is evidence of shipment. So basically, we're going to need a purchase order invoice, bill of lading for evidence of the actual shipment taking place. The bill of lading must have the exporter as the exporter of record for that particular shipment to be insurable. And the buyer must, in other words, the insured buyer must be the recipient of those goods at the destination. Okay. So in the event of a claim, you're going to have to present all those documents as showing that there was evidence of shipment, as well as all the efforts made for collections prior to, there's a 90-day window for collections. If you collect from your customer, nothing's happened as far as EXIM is concerned, and there's no need to file any claims. But at the point of those 90 days up, if you feel that you're not going anywhere with that collection effort, then you have the ability to file the claim and collect. But those are the required documents. If you don't have those required documents, then it's going to be a difficult process.
Okay. I understand the need to have documentation and to ensure payment gets moved and all that. I guess my question surrounded more in the inception of this deal. You find a client who wants to, buy your, let's say, product at this point. What is the time frame it takes to set up the deal with EXIM? Is it going to, hurt the sale and hurt my lead time by a good amount?
So if you're already in negotiation with your buyer, or if it's an existing buyer, which is a lot of cases, you can go forward and just start the application process and name your buyers. because we do have to do the underwriting of those buyers on those countries. Now, there is a first step that you must take before you enter into that, which is the country limitation schedule. That is a list of all the countries in the world, alphabetized, and identifying which programs are open or closed. In the case of the free trade agreement countries, it's likely that you're going to find completely open in all cases or most cases. If anything, it may be open and have notes to them, and those are conditions to comply with the program. But usually it's a very minor issue. So you move into the country limitation schedule, you check the country of the buyer, it's open for business under the export credit insurance program. We're looking at programs under 1 year usually. For general products, it's up to 180 days. For capital goods, they can qualify under 2 types of programs. The short term, which can allow them up to 360 days, or we enter into the medium term program, which is 1 to 5 years, depending on the volume of the sale. And if you wish to move it into a lender program, that's another issue with the lender to see how much is the minimum or how much of a repayment period they're willing to go into. So that medium term has two programs to look at. The insurance is also available for medium term, but it's an exporter application. Or you can go into a direct foreign buyer program through the lender to finance the transaction, but that will be US capital goods only.
Okay.
So in the case of the export credit insurance program, and what we're looking at generally is going to be short term, that insurance policy generally covers between 90 or 95% of the shipment value due at the time of shipment, net out any advanced deposits that you would require to start the manufacturing process. And then at that point is when we start counting the open account terms.
Okay. Now, in the event EXIM Bank won't take on the risk, is that a red flag not to do business with that firm?
So assuming that the country's open, but there's an issue with the company, yes, because we would look at, if they have trade references that are favorable, if their credit agency report shows favorable trends, if they've complied with their past history on credit terms, usually it's a company that may have not met their obligations, either with EXIM Bank, because we have had past history with them, or with their suppliers. So yes, it would be a question on whether or not that's a reputable or established company.
Okay. Kevin, do you have any experience going with third-party brokers that'll finance the middleman, be the middleman of those type of deals, pay up front and take a percent?
I have not. I can tell you, though, I have used EXIM Bank in the past, and it worked really well. And I like what Elena just said, because it's certainly, as you referenced, Jeff, it's almost like they're vetting the client for you. So if it comes back and they're not going to insure those receivables, it's pretty much a strong message that you probably ought to find another partner to do business with.
Yeah.
So I can attest that it's a great program, really is.
I should add that many exporters, regardless of whether they use our programs, they look at our country limitation schedule, number one, because it's real time on the website. And number two, because it really gives an indication of the credit health of that country. So if you're seeing no across the board, number one, it's likely going to be a sanctioned country or a country in economic or political crisis. So it's a great reference tool, even if you don't apply for the program. So I would say that that's a very good resource to have handy.
Okay, thank you, Elena.
Mm-hmm.
Gary, I'm going to come back to you. Hopefully we can hear you a little better on this one.
We'll
Do
try.
you guys operate as a freight forwarder? And yes or no, either way, what is a freight forwarder? Can you kind of give anyone that's on the line kind of an example of what a freight forwarder might do and how they help?
Freight forwarder is a company that will price out freight from point A to point B. track it, insure it. We're the ones that have the connection. In this day and age, freight companies are becoming more and more difficult to deal with. They're cutting back on customers. They can't get drivers. We deal with a lot of dedicated shipments to be sure that we have control of the freight and we can keep the customer apprised.
Okay. Are they helping with the customs and making sure it gets through the border?
Yes. Yes.
By the way, your mic is working good now, so I'm going to ask you a few questions in a row here.
Uh-oh, now I'm in the hot seat.
All right. So what is a customs broker? Is your freight forwarder going to be the same thing as a customs broker? There's a few
No, there's
roles
a
here
difference.
that
There's
I kind of wanted to find a few different roles that you hear about when you talk about international shipping. I know
Customs
freight.
broker specializes in import and export. It's very different than a freight forwarder. One of the things that Kevin talked about that I want to go back to is there's a whole group of acronyms. Kevin and I could go through acronyms all day long, but they're called Incoterms. And you can Google an Incoterm and be sure what you're getting into. Many times the customer overseas will specify what's called an Incoterm. Look it up. And they change. They change regularly. You know, we're all familiar with the old term FOB. That's changed more times than we can count.
So what is FOB, freight on board? What is that for the audience?
No, that's just what you said.
I mean, what does it mean?
It's delivered to their dock.
Okay. So who is responsible for that shipment in transit?
We are responsible for it as the freight forwarder,
I got you. Okay.
getting it to the dock.
All right.
The part
Now-
on exporting that is different is the carrier that takes it to the dock. They and the driver has to be TSA approved.
Okay, that's good to know. I didn't hear. So what's your one recommendation? I guess there's probably more than one to, avoid getting your shipments held up in customs for really any country. What's your secret sauce?
Do your homework in advance. Do not, I repeat, do not try to evade or circumvent any of their regulations. We go through this on wood almost monthly. Someone will try to get a product of theirs into Australia or China, which are two of the tough ones, and cheat. Doesn't work.
Okay.
Product gets there, there's some options. They're going to have a customer, not the freight forwarder or us, will be responsible for getting it returned, paying for that, paying for incineration, or recrating. Do it by the book.
Okay. And now, if I'm a business and I'm quoting my product internationally, and I'm trying to get some basis of cost for the shipping, should I be, trying to project what the cost is going to be, or what do you recommend for that? Keep it off as to be determined until the point of sale. I know it changes day by day.
The current price, presently, we see freight rate increases almost on a 10-day basis now. So what we get today may evolve and change.
Do you have customers that, or do you have clients that have customers that the deal will fall apart after they find out what the shipping actually is on some products?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
What do you try to, is there anything you can do at that point?
Well, one of the big things, and I mentioned it earlier, if a customer can project their needs to go, let's say to Australia, it's going to take 5 weeks on ocean, that's fine. That's one of the ways to control the cost. many of our clients have their own custom brokers at the docks that receive. That's the cleanest way to do it.
Okay. All right. Gonna shift
Kevin, you
again.
have comments on that? You've been in the business too.
That pointed to Kevin.
Yes.
Well, there's, obviously Gary discussed the differences between a customs broker and a freight forwarder. So yeah, and there are organizations that have integrated services where they have their own brokers on staff as well. So there's different scenarios for this, and he pointed out something very important. It's good to understand what that cost is going to be well in advance. And in particular, if you're paying that freight, obviously you need to roll that into your cost when you're selling your clients. And it's an extra service. You're actually having to do the administrative work. So there's a cost for everything. And certainly if you're scheduling your own freight and moving that to a different country, there's going to be work involved. You got to be careful, in particular, if they want a door-to-door delivery where you're going to have to pay those duties in a foreign country. I mean, these are things you might want to avoid once you figure out what's involved, because it's pretty extensive.
I would agree. Yeah. Switching gears one more time, Dan, if you're doing international business, should you be, more concerned or have a heightened sense when it comes to IT security, or are you just as likely to have phishing scams and international, attacks doing national business?
I think it's probably anybody is a target these days. You don't have to necessarily be an international. On that subject, though, I do want to mention that we're about to announce a webinar where we're going to have the FBI present and talk about the scams that their white collar crime unit is involved in. We did one of these pre-pandemic. We did one of these with the FBI, and we wanted to repeat it because we see a lot of these things increasing in frequency, and so we're going to be doing that, and it's going to be I think it's the early September is the date that it's going to be, but just stay tuned for coming attractions on that particular subject, because it is really eye-opening when you hear what kinds of issues they are facing and assisting companies with, and then where they draw the line, what threshold, because they're so swamped with stuff that they've got scams that are in the $250,000 and $250,000 and above frequently. Yeah. And so the people with $30,000 in a scam operation where they got some money, FBI hasn't been having the resources to really pursue it well. But there are some tips and pointers that companies can follow, and they will make suggestions like that during the webinar. I'm confident, because I've heard it before. So no, being an international, I mean, if you've got a website, you're going to be a target. Okay, they're going to find you. So
I take it the weakest link is still the human aspect of this thing.
That is most certainly true. When you hear some of the stories that the FBI shares, yes, there's a human interaction, but it's the weak. That is the weak point, that the staff in the company are not doing what they were told that they should do, or even for that. There was one story of the CFO and CEO had side-by-side offices. The CFO gets an email from his CEO that says, transfer $500,000 to this account. He did it. They walk out to lunch, happened to walk out of their offices at lunch together. He asked the CEO, I took care of that for you. And he says, took care of what? I didn't send you an email asking you to transfer $500,000. They had a guy lurking in the background, and spoofing his email address, and
Wow.
Boom, done. So those kinds of things happen, and those are the kinds of things you can learn about in this kind of a webinar. So it happens to everybody.
Thanks, Dan.
Hey, Jeff, along those lines, something else to be very wary of is sending a shipment overseas and then not really knowing that final destination of the shipment. So you'll have companies that are shipping something, they're so excited because they have an opportunity to export something. Next thing you know, it goes to, say, Dubai, and then it ends up in Iran, which is a big no-no. So these guys could not only lose their ability to export, but also perhaps even end up in jail. And Dan can talk a little more about that because it's pretty serious, though. It's a big problem.
Yeah, so I'll preface Dan's response with, so is it technically illegal if you are shipping to one location and they ship to somewhere else and it's still your product entering a country that's on the no ship list?
You,
Or is that a
like
gray
Kevin
area?
said, you need to ask those questions, okay? Ignorance is not bliss, but if yes, I mean, there's a four questions one should ask when you're, and this is in the realm of export control. You first of all have to find out, is your product or technology or service controlled for export? Does the US government have an issue with it, them approving it before it gets shipped? Then you've got, what is the country of destination? You know, you've heard references to embargoed countries, that sort of thing, but the embargoed countries, boom, you know, unless it's food or medicine, there might be exceptions for food or medicine products going to Cuba or Iran, for example, okay? But you need to know that, and you need to talk to the necessary agency of the US government, which is in that case, the Department of Treasury, but for Office of Foreign Assets Control. But so you got the embargoed countries, but you also have, if your technology does have a control in place, there may be countries with which you would be shipping to that you need to get approval from the US government before you can ship, okay? There may be other countries where you don't. Like if it's going to Canada, probably don't need to get that approval for that particular product. But if you're shipping it to, I don't know, let's say Colombia instead, okay? Yeah, you may need to get approval for it first. So that's the second question, is the where. The third question, who are the parties to the transaction? And as anyone can appreciate, there are terrorists in the world. There are people that traffic in human beings. There are people that traffic in drugs. There are a lot of nefarious characters out there doing things that are against the law. And a lot of those people have made a list of denied parties or denied persons, denied entities, okay? And when you're doing business internationally, part of your due diligence should include a scan of the online list that you can go to, and you can do this in 5 or 10 minutes, but you put all the names that you're dealing with through that check. And if you don't get a hit, okay, save that, save that, prove that you did it, do a screen print, somehow save that to show that you actually did it, did the search, and they were not on the list. So that's the third question, is, who's involved in the transaction. And that includes banks, basically. Also, many people forget the freight forwarders, the banks, the other people, anybody involved in a transaction should be checked, because they could have been put on this list, the denial list. There are banks in the world that, because they do business with Iran, for example, US companies cannot use those banks for receiving payments. Okay, so you do have to be careful about that. And then the last question is the application, the end use for the product. And there's a list of prohibited end uses that they generally are things that are related to national security, like nuclear, research labs. If you're selling a paperclip to a nuclear research facility, you better get it checked out, okay? Because you may not get the permission, okay? And missile technology, anybody manufacturing missiles in the world, there might be controls related to that. And in Russia, for example, if you're selling stuff that's going, equipment that's going into the oil fields, the offshore oil platforms, for example, there are currently a lot of regulations in place prohibiting you from that type of end use as well. So those are the four questions that one needs to address. What is the product? Is it controlled for some reason? Where is it going? Who are the parties to the transaction and the end use?
All right, thank you, Dan. On the same thread of being in compliance and not, upsetting the apple cart, how do you evaluate your shipment's worth when you're looking at duties and taxes? I've heard some stories before, just, stick a price on there and, shoot for
Yeah.
lower to avoid taxes. What's your recommendation there? And, is it based on the manufactured value, the sales value? How do you evaluate that?
Well, I won't get into the whole realm of transfer pricing. If the company is selling to their own company that they've got an office in another country, there's still there's a lot of accounting rules and international law related to that. I'm no expert in it, but you do have to be careful if you're in that situation. But keep in mind that the customs inspectors, the customs authorities in another country are essentially God when it comes to whether they believe that the price you're putting on your commercial invoice is accurate or not. And they can change it. And I've had companies call me and tell me they changed it, and it's legitimate, but they changed it anyway. And it was a legitimate, this happened in China. The example that comes to my mind right now was an example in China where the customs officials just changed the price. They raised the price, they doubled it, okay? Which then, had a huge impact, of course, to their customer and also all the duties and taxes that they had to pay. So customs authorities, the inspectors, they're going to do what they're going to do. So you got to make it realistic. And they're used to people playing the game of trying to cut the price down so that the taxes are lower. And if you don't think they have records to go back and look and see what similar products are priced at, think again.
Yeah.
Most of these places are computerized and they can just put in the HTS code for the product or the Schedule B number that we use. Okay. You can put in the HTS code for the product, they look it up. In fact, we got access to a database. If somebody wants to find the names of the importers in certain countries for a certain code, I can give you a list and show you every shipment that they've received or shipped, okay, or shipped into that country. So the importer. So they have those records. And so they're going to find out, and it includes the price. It includes where it came from. It's the import declarations essentially is what's on file. So yeah, you can't play a game with that. Now, I can go on and on about that, but I'll leave it at that for right now.
Well, I mean, my follow-up question, and I think Gary's going to talk here in a second, was basically there's a lot of compliance issues, obviously, with people, place, shipment type, valuation. One sec, Gary. Where do we go to find out all about this? Because half of it's asking the questions and even being aware of all these, these things. What is the person who isn't on this seminar or this roundtable? How do they find that out?
Is that for me?
Yeah, anyone really. Kevin, you can comment or.
Okay, so I'm currently going through an exercise with a company where they got an order for Egypt and they're wanting to know the landed costs. So what's it going to cost to get it through customs? Now, and we have tools, and these tools are public, so you can have, any exporter can get access to this as well. It's a database called customsinfo.com. But anyway, they have, for the countries of the world, for a U.S. product shipping from the United States, those are two conditions. Okay. If you have that, meet those conditions, then you can go into this database, you put in your HTS code for your product, the country of destination, and you will then get the full code number for the import into that country and the duties and taxes that are going to be levied by customs. Okay, so it's not only just a duty, there's a VAT tax typically. Okay, and you get into a country like Brazil, there, I think, a total of 8 different taxes that you pay to get something through customs in Brazil. And this does not include other fees that might come into play, like if the product is stopped and now you got storage fees or other things that a freight forwarder can better address than I. So Gary can maybe chime in on that part of it, but we can sit down and show you this is what the import duties and taxes are going to be, and calculate a landed cost, so you can get an idea what it will cost to get it through customs. Whether you're paying those costs or somebody else is paying it, somebody's paying it. It's going to impact the price of your product on the market.
All right. Gary, you can go ahead and chime in.
Yes, I think one of the things that we've covered a multitude of sins here, but one of the things we need to think about is customer satisfaction. That's the customer receiving the goods. Are we going to do this all in vain for a one-time shipment? That's an expensive transaction.
Yeah.
Put together a checklist, an action plan on what you're going to be doing to take care of the client that's receiving the product. And that starts with the documentation, a clear understanding of what the Incoterms are. We track and track everything. And we furnish that directly to our customer, and we'll also send it to the customer's client to make them a part of the transaction, feel that they're important. So there's a lot of different ways of doing business, but if you're doing this on one time, it's expensive. Okay, that was sort of my final word on everything. Kevin, you've been in it on both ends of it.
Okay, now Gary, from your end, are you catching the things that we're talking about with Dan and Kevin in terms of compliance? Are you guys helping assist the client with that as well?
Yes.
Okay, so if you use a freight forwarder or a packaging company like Freighters and Freighters, they will assist you with those if you haven't been through this process.
That's
and
right.
It's new.
We'll give recommendations and suggestions.
Okay. Elena, I'm going to come back to you in EXIM Bank for the financing. I did note on the website that, you know, you'll take deals that you don't compete with national firms for credit lines on that. Do we have to seek out a credit line with, you know, an independent private bank before we approach EXIM Bank if you're non-compete?
So in the financing arena, what we do is we work in conjunction with the network of banks that are authorized lenders. And depending on the program, and I imagine you're talking about the working capital guarantee program, there's a list on the website of authorized lenders. That's a short list. That's the ones that have delegated authority to lend without having to go through all the requirements that we usually have. So they have delegated authority to give up to a certain amount for companies. So we always try to suggest that the exporter first discuss it with their lender because it will be the easiest relationship to add on this facility. However, if they are not participants in the program, we will be happy to match them to a lender that would fit their needs. So it's really a matter of finding out first if your lender is part of our program, and if not, come to me and I'll be happy to refer you to a lender who would be willing to go through that process with them. Okay.
So, and I don't know if I was reading this correct, you might be able to, you know, correct me, but we're talking about it from the exporter perspective, EXIM's credit program and credit insurance and all that.
Yes.
It's really helping the buyer as well too in terms of financing them, correct?
Absolutely. Actually, it helps everybody. On the lender, on the well, obviously on the lender side, it's enhancing their relationship with the exporter. On the exporter side, they're becoming more competitive in the marketplace by being able to offer open account terms to their buyers while mitigating that risk of non-payment. Yeah. So that policy also serves as an additional tool for financing, which is they can assign the proceeds of the policy to that lender or any lender that's willing under the program to enhance their credit facilities for, it's a sort of simplified way of getting working capital for exports so that they have insured receivables that have advanced abilities that the lender can provide to them. So if they have a portfolio of insured accounts receivable of $1 million, that lender may want to get the assignment of proceeds of that policy and use it as a quasi collateral of sorts to be able to advance against those insured policies.
Okay. I guess I have one other question. This goes back, I guess, either Dan or Kevin on this one. I know that you can find opportunities with the federal government through FedBiz Ops. Are there international opportunities that flow through FedBiz Ops, to the embassies or anything along those lines?
I guess maybe I'll jump in first, Kevin. I'm not aware of that. Maybe Kevin does know, but I will say that I do get leads from my colleagues working in embassies, and these have become, during COVID, they've become more frequent. And I don't know if that's just the focus of our staff has been more in going out and trying to find companies in their market area, in their country, that are seeking certain types of products. So we do get leads that come in, and the way they tend to get handled is I send them out to companies that I know. So if you want to be able to tap into those, let me know, give me a call, and so I can get to better understand what you do, and then I will, put you on into my database so that when I send out these leads, I can include you, any company in the audience, in that email.
Perfect.
So
Right.
just to add to that, Jeff, I know Canada has a database you can access. Most of the countries do have federal opportunities, in particular with infrastructure projects. They're looking for types of products and companies that they can't find in their local market. So there are some things there. In some cases, you do have to either be registered as a business in that respective market, or you have to use a percentage of labor. There's always some sort of requirement, I guess, going back to the local market there. So to answer your question, yes, there are opportunities there. Most of them are related to infrastructure projects.
Okay.
Let me add another comment on this. If as a follow-on, if you find an opportunity in another country and it's going out, say it's a government entity that is going out and trying to procure something. So they're putting out an RFP onto the streets, and then you find out about it. One of the things that companies should consider doing is contacting us. We have a program we call commercial diplomacy, where if a U.S. company is bidding on a project with a government entity in the country, the embassy will advocate on the U.S. company's behalf with the ministry or the government entity that is conducting that procurement. So please keep that in mind. We've had much success with that, and it helps level the playing field. We had a company recently do one for $40 million in Kuwait, just as an example, where they beat a German competitor for a project. So these can be substantial projects, like Kevin is alluding to. They tend to be more, larger things, infrastructure related things. But yes, but not necessarily. It could be for just a lot of product that they're looking to source and buy from the United States or elsewhere. So yeah, please reach out to us. Let us know. It's a free service, and we just want to make sure companies are aware of it and can get the business if at all possible, so we bring more money back into the U.S.
Yep, I agree.
I would also like to add that EXIM Bank does have project finance opportunities as well. Obviously financing directly to the end user of that project, but we can carve out the U.S. content. For example, if it's machinery or materials, we may be able to support that separately from the bigger picture, which of course we have a U.S. content requirement. So it would have to have those parameters involved, but we would carve out that U.S. content portion to be able to support the exporter.
Okay, thank you, Elena.
Mhm.
All right, I think this is where we're going to wrap up the discussion. I'd like to thank everyone who attended, and I'd like to thank the panelists here and Gary for sponsoring the event with Creators and Freighters. We really appreciate everyone's support for this, supporting manufacturing in Southwest Florida. Without your efforts, this clearly wouldn't happen, especially our board and everyone here that volunteers their time. We're all here for the same reason: build up manufacturing in the local economy here. So and I also would like to thank the panelists at the end. They do not have these questions in advance, so it is kind of nerve-wracking, and they're under the spotlight, especially when I pick them out on a whim. So if you're on the call and you're interested in joining the SRMA, or you know someone that might like to join, please reach out, info@srma.net, or you can visit the website and sign up right there. If you know someone that would like to sponsor or might be interested in attending the next event, also send them to the website. They can register there as well too. So again, look for Rob Harris. He's our new executive director. You'll be seeing his face more often, and we're going to be a little more active, I believe, with his leadership. If you're interested in our upcoming events, they are listed on the website, or you can send us an email, again, at info@srma.net, and we'll give you what's upcoming. I know August 18th, we have a manufacturing summit for manufacturers only at FGCU, where we're going to be discussing a variety of different topics. So we'd like to see as many in attendance as we can, spread the word. So SRMA has now partnered with Rob, and through Florida Makes, we've added business consulting to a list of some of the opportunities that we offer our services. So if you're interested in having your business evaluated, or you want to contact us and see what we can offer in that field, please, again, reach out. So really, that's it. I want to thank everyone again for your time. Great discussion, great panelists, and we'll see everyone at the next event. Thank you all.
For inviting us.
Thank you.
Thank you.